I was recently advised to look at some professional games, which was surprising to me because I never felt like looking at professional games was high on the list of things I should do in order to improve my game, but I've been trying to see if I can do more of that. I don't really have a good strategy for doing it yet that I feel like has really benefited me so far, but I was told not to pay too much attention to the moves, just kind of go through it. And, you know, it's got me thinking, like, what should I really be paying attention to when I am looking at a professional game? So I'm going to think about that, and I'll get back to you guys on it and see if I find anything interesting while I do it. It is very enjoyable to me. It's definitely a lot less stressful than the actual game of Go. But, you know, in terms of will it improve my actual game? Well, that remains to be seen. Welcome to Startpoint, the show about Go for Go fans away from the board. And we're doing hot takes today. Or maybe they're warm takes. Some of these aren't really hot takes. They're just cute little opinions that I might have. Some of the takes may be particularly high in temperature. That's for you to decide. So I'm just going to list a bunch of stuff that I personally have an opinion on about the game of Go. And I'd love for you to disagree with me and chime in and debate and discuss these things. Let's get into it. The first one that I have, I think draws should be allowed in Go. Sometimes we kind of tout that Go is superior because there are no draws, and we have this 0.5 Komi thing in place so that draws are never a thing in the game of Go. But why is that such a strong point in Go? I feel maybe if two players are equally strong, they should be able to draw a game. In fact, I think drawing a game would be kind of a dramatic finish, and maybe it would be dissatisfying for the players, but it would be somewhat rare, and I think it's a lot more difficult to pull off than in chess, where people can really go for the draw and force that draw to happen strategically. But in Go, you really have to try to get as many points as you can, although I'm sure there are certain situations where you could either go for a draw or you could go for the win, and that would be a very high level of play, I think, because typically weaker players would not have the strength to actually force any draws in the game of Go. Unlike in chess, where even amateurs, I feel like, could easily try to go for a draw. I mean, I've drawn people in chess and I suck at chess, and I've like kind of forced it to happen. So draws, I think, wouldn't be such a bad idea in Go. And the way that would happen is with Chinese counting 7 Komi. Not 7.5. So we know with Chinese rules, we go with 7.5 Komi, and Japanese rules, we go 6.5 Komi. And that's just due to the way Chinese counting works, where the score is always odd. So you can't have 6.5. It would just be the equivalent of a 5.5 Komi. So we bump it up to 7.5. And many professionals do believe that in Chinese rules, they prefer to play as white because of the extra Komi. And I think that from my brief research, with AI self-plays, 7 Komi is actually the sweet spot where you get 50% win rate from black and white. And so 7 Komi with Chinese counting, I think, would be the way to go if we were to allow draws in the game. That is hot take number 1. Hot take number 2. Okay, this one, some of you may not even have heard of as a discussion point for this to be considered a hot take, but my hot take, it's a pretty lukewarm take, but I think Go, the name Go for the game, is the best English name for the game. I think a lot of people do not like this name to be used in English, and they prefer maybe Paduk, the Korean, which, I mean, I'm partial to, because I'm, I have a Korean background, so Baduk, I'm all for it. But I feel like Go is just catchy, it's easy to remember, it's easy to say, there's no confusion about how to pronounce it. Baduk also, it's not that hard to pronounce, but it is a little more foreign sounding. It's a lot better to call it Baduk for SEO and search, things like that. It's hard to find things related to Go because Go is such a generic word, and that's the main point I think people have against the name Go in English, is that it's just a common English word. And it makes things a lot more difficult, especially in the world of the internet in which we live. Which, we can work around it. We tag all our stuff with Baduk and Weiqi, and we search things like Go Game and things like that. And so it's not too bad. I have found ways to locate Go content on the internet, even though this name Go is pretty generic. I still think that Go is the better name for the game. And the other name, the Chinese name, Weiqi, is also a pretty good, unique name, although I think, just throwing the Q in there, or depending on how you spell it, sometimes they throw apostrophes in there. There's a lot of inconsistency in that, so I think maybe that's why the community has more gravitated towards Baduk. But I think Go, I just personally like the name Go. It's a nice, solid, it's a very simple name, and I feel like it feels like the game of Go. Even the letters, they look like Go stones. Maybe I'm going a little too far here. On a side note, I do like the name for the game from the Wheel of Time fantasy series, which I have not read or have any idea of what it's about, but I know that they call it Stones, which I think is a pretty elegant name as well. But anyway, I like Go. And then in a related hot take to that, my personal preference for Go is that it should be capitalized. I think that when you write out the name Go, you should capitalize the G just to distinguish it from the generic word and to make it more, stand out more. I really dislike the ing version of the name with the E at the end, which, I'm sure it's trying to solve a lot of problems, especially with searching on the internet and things like that, but it just doesn't look right to me. G-O-E, that's how they spell it. G-O-E. I don't like it. It's a visceral thing. It's not a rational thing. I look at that and I just don't feel like that's the game. And it's such a highly subjective point of view, but that's just how I feel. I like the name Go with the capitalization. I think that's just a good compromise between, having the name look so much like the common word to go versus, the Go with an E, which I don't like, or any other version. So I think Go capitalized kind of like makes it stand out and go, oh, look, that's not really the word Go. That's something different. And maybe in the future, search engines can kind of recognize that in a special case for like a case-sensitive, context-aware search. Usually when you search things, you do not have a case-sensitive search, but maybe, certain search engines could recognize, oh, when people capitalize the word Go, they're probably talking about the game and not the word Go. This is a lot of talk on the name of Go, but one final point on it is I think when we say Go, whenever possible, I feel like we should try to avoid saying the game of Go, which it's because we have to distinguish, people don't know what Go is, so we have to say the game of Go, which is a little annoying, but we should, I feel like, just say when we play Go, right? We never say the game of chess, which chess is, you just say chess. We would never say, oh, yeah, I like to play the game of chess. That sounds a little pedantic, you know? So I feel like in the same way, we should say, I play Go. I mean, I feel like when you say I play Go, that people kind of already know you're not talking about the word to go. Okay, this is getting way too in the weeds here. So let's move on. Okay, I feel like this one's a pretty hot take compared to my other one. So it's not super hot, but I don't think we should, when we introduce the game of Go. Oh no, I said it. I said the game of Go. When we introduce Go, I don't think we should introduce it as an ancient Chinese board game. This isn't because I think we should ignore the roots of the game of Go. Oh, I can't stop saying it. I realize how much I say it now. It's just hard to not say the game of Go. Is this just me, or is this everybody? Okay, anyway, I'm saying when we introduce Go as an ancient Chinese game, I feel that sometimes people can kind of feel distanced from it. Of course, there are those who feel more attracted to the game. Like people who are kind of interested in Asian culture can maybe look at Go, and being introduced as an ancient Chinese board game or an ancient Asian game may kind of be a strong point and strong selling point for them. Sure. But I feel the vast majority of people won't really view that as something that will make it seem accessible to them. We don't introduce chess as an ancient Indian board game, for example. Chess is an international board game, although it does have roots in India as the game called Chaturanga. But for Go, we tend to always have to qualify the game as like, oh, it's an ancient Chinese game. It's 3,000 years old. And we kind of have this little speech prepared when we introduce the game. But I think we should just say, oh, I'm playing Go. And we should treat it like an international game if we want it to be considered an international game. Not saying we should ignore the roots. I think the roots are very important, but as an introductory thing, we should just kind of call it something very common, checkers. Like, oh, I'm playing checkers. And you're like, if you have never played checkers before, you'll be like, what's that? What's checkers? And so that's the game of Go, which I will say again and again, and realize, and now it's going to bother me that I say that. I didn't realize that I disagreed with my own hot take. Anyway, moving on. Lessons in the Fundamentals of Go by Toshiro Kageyama is not a good book for beginners. I've mentioned this before. People love this book. I actually love this book, but it's very difficult. Sometimes it's a little bit wrong, and I think it's a little hard for me to say that if you're starting out with the game, this book is the one that you should read. It kind of gets into, it just talks to you as if you've been playing for a while, and you can kind of sense that right away. Cause it goes in saying like, oh, ladders, like you're still on about ladders, where beginners may be like, what's a ladder? Like, I don't know what a ladder is. And they haven't even had experience with a ladder, but, so it's more of an intermediate book. I think it's a great book, and I think a lot of people value its entertainment, or a lot of people like the entertainment value of the book. And it does have a lot of good stuff in it, but it's just not for beginners. The next take that I have, or opinion that I have, everyone should play to improve. Now, this may be, to some of you, it may be an obvious opinion. Like, of course, yes, when you play Go, you should play to improve. But not everybody thinks this way. A lot of people think that Go should just kind of be something that you just do for fun, which I'm not invalidating at all. Sure, if you want to view the game as something that you just do for fun, that's totally fine. And even if you're like not trying at all to improve your game, that's great. I am not against that at all. But when you have an opportunity to improve at the game and you don't take it, I think that is against the spirit of the game. Let me tell you a story. It's not really a story. It's just a bit of an anecdote. I saw someone playing against a pro, a literal professional player, and they played a certain move, and the pro commented on that move saying, hey, that's not really correct to play like that. Obviously, if I'm playing against a pro, I would be graced to have the advice of the pro and just take that as gold. And I would love for a pro to comment on my moves and tell me what I shouldn't be doing. But this individual, the response shocked me. He said, oh, I know, but I just like to play that way. I just prefer to play that way. And you're literally like, a professional player is literally giving you this special moment to tell you like how you can improve your game, and you're being stubborn and you're saying, I know this is wrong, but this is the way I want to play. Like that, I think is not correct. And I can't sympathize with that. I understand playing for fun is a big thing, but I think there comes a point where you need to also have humility and be open to improvement, even though you may not be taking it as seriously as other people. That's just my thoughts. And there's a bit of a related excerpt from The Master of Go. Again, here I'm bringing that book in. It's such a good book, where there's an East versus West mentality in that game. In that book, the author, or sorry, the narrator of the book, he is he's kind of like the reporter, reporting on the game featured in The Master of Go, but obviously someone who's reporting on the game will have some understanding of Go. But he encounters a Western player, and that's probably one of the most interesting chapters, I think, in the book, where he notices such a philosophical difference in approaching the game that it kind of irks him. And he just kind of realizes that this person has no shame in losing and just plays again and again and again, happily losing, happily being terrible at the game. And his own view of the game is that it should be taken seriously and with reverence and things like. So there are these two mentalities here, and I'm not saying that I completely side with the East side mentality, where the game is such a rigid thing where you have to take it seriously and it's sacred and everything like that. No, not at all. But I just want to say, if you're going to take up this hobby, like, I think a big part of it is being open to learn. That's all I'm trying to say. All right, let's move on to the next one. Okay, this one has to do with online play. Undos should only be requested if you misclick. This one may not be a hot take, but I think that, the undo button just being there in certain Go servers, namely OGS, really draws some controversy in terms of etiquette. It adds a significant layer of etiquette to the game where you're like, if somebody requests an undo, you have this moment of like, you definitely don't have to accept, but you kind of have this debate. Is it rude not to accept? And I think, you can't control other people requesting undos. Imagine they misread something and they want to undo it. I mean, that's, I think, not the best time to undo. But in regards to your own play, I feel that if you're going to request an undo, I think it should be only for misclicks, for things where you slipped on the mouse and things like that. Because if you you fumble the stones in the game, like, you're going to be able to like kind of shift it around a little bit to where you meant to play it, and no one will really, think twice about it. In online play, yes, you should be careful with your mouse, but if it ruins the whole game just because you kind of like your muscle kind of spasmed down a certain point or something like that, I think that's okay for an undo. If you misread, if you misplayed, if you regret your move, I think that's part of the game and you shouldn't try to undo those. There's that. That's my opinion on that. The next one. Here is a modified famous quote, maybe the quote. If there are sentient beings on other planets, then they might not play Go. So, as you all probably know, the original quote goes, if there are sentient beings on if there are sentient beings on other planets, then they most certainly play Go. And this was by Emanuel Lasker, who was a world chess champion. But I'm not sure about that. If Go is such a universal game to the extent where we think that if aliens were out there, they would play Go, then why was this game only discovered in Asia? I mean, we have so many different things on this earth where we've discovered them independently in several different locations, but Go is not one of them. I feel that maybe Go is a little more unique than we might give it credit for. I can imagine maybe like a Go-like game somewhere. Maybe it wouldn't be a grid. I feel like maybe the grid could be a human thing. Like if there are aliens out there, maybe their method of organizing visual stuff, or they may even not have visual stuff. Imagine there's an awesome book that I'm thinking of, the Project Hail Mary. It's by the guy who wrote The Martian, but in that book there's like an alien species that can't see, and like all their other senses are heightened, and like they have a different way of interacting with the world. And I feel like, if you really think about like how other species might be, they might not even have visual systems. So it's like they might not play Go. I just feel like they might not play Go. That's my little hot take on that famous quote. Okay, here's another one. This one's a terminology thing. I got a couple terminology things. I think that influence, territory and influence should be called power. I've heard somebody call it power, and I thought that sounds right. Power. I understand what influence is really trying to say, but influence is such a hard word to understand when you're starting off the game. Power, I feel like, really captures what I think influence is. Feel free to disagree on that, and I'd love to know your thoughts. It just feels more intuitive to me to call it power. There are a few terms that could use a few names. I think Bulky 5, not the best name. I mean, it's bulky and there's 5 points. But I like to call it the thumbs up shape. And then the Rabbity 6 is, I've mentioned this before. I call it the Fishy 6. I don't have new names for these next two, the L group and Bent 4 in the corner, but those are such important concepts, and yet the names, they just don't really have a good catchy thing to them, The L group, I'm not sure. Not so sure about that. And the thing is, like, L group and Bent 4 in the corner, I feel like they both have like L shapes, and it's kind of confusing at first. It took me a while to understand. Anyway, I only got a couple more of these. Next one is that this one really is a lukewarm take, but I think AI should think for a period of time. Whenever you're playing an AI, it should have like a moment to itself before it plays the next move. Because, especially for beginners, the instant move playing by the AI, it's so bad for beginners because they'll match the pace and they'll just kind of, they'll just kind of go along with what the AI is doing. And it's just bad for the flow of the game. And I feel that like when you're playing, even when you're playing against a computer who doesn't need time at all to play, it should have a period of time to think. Oh, I think that one game on Steam, Just Go, does this pretty well. If I remember correctly, it actually kind of waits a little bit before every move, so it doesn't feel like you're playing a computer as much. I really liked that part of the game, at least. Although it, by the actual moves it played, it was not very human-like. But in terms of actually timing the moves, it was it was better than my experience with other AI experiences. And last but not least, I guess this is another terminology one that I missed, but I think ladders should be called staircases. Ladders, I mean, I don't even know why it's called a ladder. It's like in other languages, I think like in Korean, it's called like a chute or something. But I don't like, it's not really a ladder, is it? I mean, I guess like you kind of like, now that I'm thinking about it, I guess it's maybe like the movement of the ladder where you're like grabbing and alternating the rungs. But I feel like they look like steps, you know? They look like, I would even be open to calling them steps. But staircases, steps, something like that. I guess the only downside to that term is that you can't really break a staircase, you know, like when you break the ladder. But I don't know. Then anyway, those are my hot takes. I'm really curious how these will be received and whether you'll just consider all these super, super lukewarm takes, or there are any of them that will be, you know, particularly vehemently opposed and controversial. So I'm excited to see the response to these. But now it's time for the DDK Advice Corner, and the tip of the day is play a normal opening. I see some of y'all DDKs, and what are you doing? You're invading a corner on the second move. You're attaching to things in the opening unnecessarily. You're playing 5-4 points, although, you know, that's not a terrible move, but I feel that when you're starting off, it's maybe not the first one that you should choose as the opening move that you play. Just play the corners and then play the approaches and enclosures and move on from there. Try not to make it so complicated. Try not to be so weird. Making your game so complicated makes it hard to form a foundation upon which to learn, because your decisions will affect the decisions after that, and they will affect the decisions after that. And so when you're getting a review, some of the advice that you receive will be just because of the result of the weird things that you played. And if you just didn't play those weird things, you might have another learning opportunity that is a more standard learning opportunity. That's my 2 cents. Please, when you're starting off in the game, play a normal opening. It'll probably do you good. In Go News, we have Yang Yaoling, 7-Dan. I think that's amateur 7-Dan, who wins the 51st Paris International Tournament. Apparently one of the oldest annual European tournaments that was held on March 30th to April 1st. And there was about 170 participants. And although it's an international tournament, as it's titled, I think it's mostly from Europe. And Yang Yaoling defeated Dai Junfu 8-Dan to take first place for the 51st Paris International Tournament. In news on the other side of the globe, there was an article that I saw about the decline of Go in Korea. As you may be aware, there was an abolishment of the Go department, or Paduk department, in Myongji University, and this university is famously known to be basically the only university that offers a dedicated Go program. And there was a protest and things like that. And if, you know, I was running Starpoint back then, I would have covered that as well. Just a side note, I do remember reading, you guys remember the the Hongdae disaster? Or was it Itaewon? I think it was Itaewon. There was a disaster, a crowd crush in Korea on one of the Halloweens. And there was like a significant a protest for because of the abolishment of the Go program in Myongji University, and there was a sizable number of students in a stairwell, and they were kind of getting crowded, and then one of the students shouted, "Remember, the crowd crush," and they all kind of fell in line, and they were just like, "Oh yeah, we better not get too crazy here." Anyway, side note there, but anyway, the article reported a few kind of sad facts about where Go was heading in Korea. like the number of Go players in Korea. I don't know what exactly defines what a Go player is, but 32% in the year 2000, which is really high, right? Really high for, we would love 32% over here in the States. And then 19.4% in the current year. So, I mean, we would still love a 20% population who knows how to play Go, but it is a declining figure. So it's not as happy news for Korea. And there was substantial cut in government funding from what was previously 21 billion won, which is about 15 million US dollars, to completely, no Go funding at all. So those are some pretty big changes, and it kind of signals some directional changes for where Go is headed in Korea. And that decline is kind of upsetting and depressing for a lot of Go fans, especially in Korea. And so a lot of people are kind of just a little bit sad about the state of things, and it's not really always the institution's faults themselves, but partially it just has to do with people not being interested in Go. There's the young people have short attention spans scrolling on YouTube. I know that when I'm scrolling on YouTube and I see a Go problem, my instinct is to just swipe past it, but I will try to, stay on it and be like, oh, you know what? This is probably a good problem. Let me go try to solve it. But, I can see the temptation there to just kind of mindlessly scroll without thinking, because Go requires thinking. Whoa. Okay. But this news, which is more of just like kind of a report, does have a positive counterpart to it, as Lee Chang-ho, legendary Korean professional, is leading the initiative to revitalize Go in Korea. Lee Chang-ho and Vice Prime Minister Lee Ju-ho, not really sure. I think he's the Deputy Prime Minister and Education Minister of South Korea. They signed an agreement to support Go programs in schools. So on the flip side of Myungji University abolishing the Go program, we have some people actually acting to promote Go in Korea. And this initiative aims to integrate Go education in schools and enhance, character development, all those benefits that Go provides for young children. And then I mentioned, I'm not sure if it was last week or 2 weeks ago, there was the agreement to also establish a National Go Training Institute. And so there are initiatives going on in Korea to revitalize Go as well. So not all is hopeless. So that's some good news there. And that'll do it for Go News. And it's time for listener mail. On the episode where I talk about my friend becoming a Wondan player, Logarithm Blues writes, thought this was a great opportunity to get another voice on the show. I listened for the first time in a long time just in case this was the case. It's nothing personal, but I can't really enjoy listening to podcasts with just one voice. Would be interested to listen again if you manage to involve others. Thanks for making more Go content all the same, though. Well, thanks for writing in, Logarithm Blues, and I did respond to your comment because I kind of knew you wouldn't be listening to this episode. But just as a message to all of you out there who are listening, thanks so much for listening to my lonely voice. I do want to have people on the show. I just have been procrastinating on getting those logistics solved. And my Go friends, my buddies are kind of introverts, and they prefer not to be in the limelight. So I'm trying to see if I can get some other willing participant, and I'm sure I'll be reaching out to more well-known content creators in the future, but I do want to get things set up on my end before I do that. But anyway, thanks for all of you who are listening, and I appreciate this kind of feedback as well. Ache607 writes, I did not expect the pun at the end. You really got me in the first half. Did every episode end on a joke? I'm afraid I missed them now. This reminds me of I think when I was watching Hikaru no Go, there was like an end credits scene, like after the credits, there was like a scene or something, and I was like, what did I miss? I haven't been watching these. I haven't been, and I had to like go back and check, but I realized they didn't actually start until later. And it's the same thing for these jokes, because I hadn't started since like a few episodes back, so you haven't missed too much. And I don't know how long I will be able to keep up the whole joke thing. But before we get into that, the question of the week is, what is your Go hot take? I am curious, are there any strong opinions that you have about the game of Go or related to the game of Go that you might feel a little bit shy about sharing because people might disagree? I want to know those hot takes. And if you want to share your thoughts on this question, or if you have a ghost story to share, ghost story? Not a ghost story, but a go story, or a go ghost story would be interesting. Ooh. If you have any of those to share, or you have a question to ask me, you can comment on YouTube or on the Reddit post for this episode, or you can email me directly at starpointpaduk@gmail.com. That's starpointbaduk@gmail.com. If you're a YouTube listener, I would greatly appreciate a like and a subscribe, and if you're a podcast listener, reviews and ratings help. A very special thank you to Chris M. and Jeffrey H. for supporting Starpoint. I really appreciate it. And you know who the happiest Go player is? It's Fujiwara no Sai. Because he doesn't sigh. Because he's so happy. Thanks for listening. Keep playing Go. Thank you.